Hello and welcome. My name is Tom. This is the Enthusiasm Project Season 8, Episode 5. And as tradition dictates, since we are halfway through the season, that means today is a Q&A episode. But before we get into that, I actually have a Q for you to A. So here's my question. If you were going to host a remote podcast, what would be the best way to do that? Oh, I can answer for you, actually. Don't worry. The answer is the sponsor of this episode and this season of the Enthusiasm Project, which is Riverside.fm. As you probably know, I've used Riverside FM myself for a long time, both as a host and a guest. If you're unfamiliar with Riverside, though, it does let you easily record studio-quality remote audio and video from anywhere with no latency. Here's the important part, regardless of your internet bandwidth. Riverside will automatically record locally to each participant's computer and then upload that all to the magical cloud. This means that your guests don't have to do anything, which is very, very important, and you will still get full quality isolated audio and video tracks for each person. Those locally recorded files are supported up to 2160 4K video and 44.1 or 48,000 kilohertz audio, and there's also a mobile app to make things easier for your guests. The more that you can make things easy for your guests, the better. I promise you that, and easier for yourself as well. You can publish and share those recordings immediately, or just put them in your editing software of choice with separate audio and video tracks. If you'd like to give Riverside a try, there's a link in the description, and you can also use promo code TOM15 for 15% off of your subscription. So thank you again to Riverside.fm for sponsoring not only this episode, but this entire season, of which we're already halfway through, of the Enthusiasm Project. I very much appreciate that. And jumping into today's topic, questions and answers. I really enjoyed these episodes because actually the very first question will be related to this because I previewed that one already. But I very much enjoy these episodes because what it lets me do is sort of see what people are interested in right now. I try to think of topics that are relevant or interesting, but that's just me. And so a Q&A, it's like, okay, right now, at least as of today and yesterday, as I put out that call for questions, this is what's on people's minds. So it sort of lets other people direct the topic of the show, which is very fun. And then it's kind of nice to like bounce back and forth between things every once in a while. So I always have a lot of fun with those. And if you're wondering what we're doing, I am recording through the Earthworks ETHOS today. So that's the one we're using today. Yet last week was the mystery mic, which I still can't totally reveal. Although a lot of people pulled a lot of very impressive detective work to figure that, to make some guesses, I guess. Or no, I shouldn't say. It was not impressive at all. They definitely weren't close at all. That's what I meant to say. And speaking of mics, I have a microphone right next to me that just got delivered, but I haven't used yet. Still in the package. It's Deity's new video mic, which is the VMic D4. This is a pretty interesting one. I haven't used it, so I can't say anything about it. For video mics, I've been really happy with the Sony ECM B1M, like the one that automatically goes on top of the camera. It doesn't automatically goes on the camera, automatically does everything, connects to the camera, no battery, no cables. It's amazing. Really like that microphone, but it is like a $350 microphone. It's not an inexpensive one. And so what Deity has done here is the Rode VideoMic NTG was previously like my favorite video mic because I think it's a really great one. But that design with like the gain dial on the back, everything about the NTG, I do think Deity is the one that kind of came out with that first. And then Rode came out with it. Super great design, super popular. And then this microphone here, what's interesting about it is very much like that NTG style of microphone. It's a short shotgun microphone, has a gain dial on the back, it can be USB-C. Instead, it did solve the one complaint I had, which is there's no built-in battery. So it's not rechargeable, but it just takes a single AAA battery. So just keep a bunch of those in your bag and you're good, I guess. But the good part about that is with the other ones that have a built-in battery, no matter how good the microphone is, once the battery dies or stops performing well, the microphone's gone, even though there's nothing actually wrong with the microphone. And so this sort of solves that problem, which is absolutely fantastic. And on top of that, and it comes with a shock mount, of course, and all the cool things, But the reason I'm excited about it is because they somehow managed to keep it at a $99 price point, which is it's basically like, okay, if you're not going to get something specialized like the Sony B1M, why would you get anything else? Why would you pay $200 or $150 for something else when you can get this for $99? I haven't used it yet, though, so I can't speak to the sound quality. I've only seen like the Deity promo videos. So I'm excited to try that out and see if that could be a really awesome recommendation for people looking to level up their on-camera mic audio, or even, I guess, a USB mic or a short, I don't know, get a really good video mic for a decent price. So that's super, super cool and super exciting. Camera-wise, I'm doing something this is the very first thing for the video version of this podcast. This is the very first time I've ever filmed a thing. You're seeing the first thing I've made with a Nikon camera. So if it doesn't look amazing, I think it actually looks pretty decent, but I'm still learning. So this is the Nikon Z9, which is one of their flagship cameras that I've been able to borrow for the month. So it's not like my camera that I get to keep, but I have it for about a month and I get to have all kinds of fun with it, which is very, very cool. So this is the Z9 through the 24-70 2.8 lens. They also sent me a 50 millimeter 1.2, which is gorgeous, but very unusable for how close I am to the camera right now. So this is a 24-70 at 24 2.8. You kind of see what that looks like. I think that this actually looks pretty decent. I'm pretty shocked at how sharp it is. I did have to just sort of tweak some of the colors in Ecamm because I'm not used to Nikon color profiles, and obviously this isn't a log profile or anything. I guess I could add a LUT through Ecamm though. Anyway, I think that the camera is I know the camera is capable of better image quality than what you're seeing right now, but for me, just connecting it via HDMI and, changing a couple basic settings, this is pretty good. It's a really fun camera to use. It's a super easy camera to like figure out, navigate through. It's set up they did a really good job with this camera. I'm super impressed with it. It's been really fun to try something that's entirely different. Like I have no familiarity or biases towards or against Nikon. It's just something I've never even touched before. So it's a really fun camera. That's what I'm using today. All right, that stuff out of the way. Let's jump into the Q&As. I have a tendency sometimes to forget voice messages if they're there, so I want to start with that. So we have a voice submission from Keith White, who I always appreciate, Keith, the support and the kindness that you always show. So thanks so much. Here is, if I can play it correctly, Keith White's Q&A question.
Hey, Tom, just wanted to say I love your podcast and YouTube channel. 99% of the gear I use for my podcast and channel are inspired by you. So I thank you, but my wallet does not. But my question is, throughout all the podcasts that you've done, how do you stay motivated and keep coming up with different topics each week? Because I know I've listened to all your podcasts and each one typically does have a new topic. And just how do you stay motivated to keep doing the podcast and coming up with new ideas? Thanks.
Thanks so much, Keith. I appreciate that. I'm laughing because when I first heard your message and you said, I love your videos and stuff, 99%. I thought you were going to say you love my videos and stuff 99% of the time. And then I was immediately like, what is the 1% that he doesn't like? What is wrong? And then, of course, you're like 99% of the gear, which is super cool. I really appreciate that. It's really fun to see, I don't know, stuff I can like or be excited about or recommend, and then other people take it and put it in their workflow. I think that's amazing. So I appreciate that, and I appreciate all the support very much. This is a very interesting question that maybe I can give you a helpful answer for, especially for anyone who produces like regular things, whether it's a podcast or a stream. I do try to have a different topic every week, but now we're 130 episodes in and almost 4 years. That's a lot of time and topics, so it does get difficult. There are times that I do revisit topics, especially things to do maybe with more, I guess, like the quote unquote business side of things, because it sort of changes every year. We can do like updates every year. So sometimes the same topic pops up, but maybe with a different perspective or a sort of an update on like what I learned since the last time we talked about it. But it is sort of tricky. The thing I've learned is to trust my gut. Last week's episode ended up being all about camera bags, and I mentioned that originally that was supposed to be about something else to do with YouTube, but I was really excited when I came with this YouTube idea, but when it came time to record last week, I was not in the mood to talk about that thing. Not that I didn't want to do that idea anymore, but I just like wasn't in the mental space where that's what I was thinking about and that's what I cared about. So instead of forcing that and making an episode that I thought I just phoned it in and wasn't that great, I decided to just switch the topic to the thing I was interested in. So I try to make that align the idea versus what I'm interested in. I will usually take, okay, if I know I'm going to do 10 episodes, I will usually roughly outline those, so I can say, okay, I know right away episode 5 is a Q&A. Here's a topic here. I think this would be great. Maybe I'm going to have a guest here. They could go here. This would be a good first episode. And then I leave some stuff blank too, because, I don't know what's going to happen over those 10 weeks. Maybe I want to add something new or change something around or even take an idea and move it to the next season or something. So it's just sort of like I have my ideas, but nothing is set in stone until I actually want to record and then diving into what I'm really interested in at that moment. So that way it's easy to talk about, easy to make a show about. The motivation part, though, I really have been loving the switch from 21 episode seasons to 10 episode seasons, because the first 6, I honestly, I feel bad. I don't know this. I know, we did 5 seasons of 21 episodes, which is a lot. 21 weeks is a long time, and every once in a while I might have missed a week here or there for one reason or another, but for the most part they were pretty straight through, like 21 weeks. Maybe it would take 23 weeks to get through a season or something. That is a long time, and that's a lot of work, and that's a lot of just like one after another after another after another. And to do that, and I wouldn't take much of a break. I'd take like 2 weeks off in between and then just back to the next one. So that was a lot, and that got really tiring. Just like, I didn't want the podcast to feel like a chore. And so I decided like 10 weeks is a lot more manageable, because as soon as you start, you can kind of already see the light at the end of the tunnel, but it's still long enough to like consistently explore a topic, to, be a part of someone's routine if they want to listen every week or, on their commute or whatever. You can still be a regular part of everybody's routine, but it's not like I'm committing half of a year or something to a single season of a thing, it's tough and difficult to plan around. So I guess this is now the 3rd season that I've been doing 10 episodes. That has been great. And then I've been trying to be more comfortable taking a little bit longer breaks in between the seasons, like at least a month, just because I think that really helps not only come up with new topics to talk about, but to also, like, I start missing the show. So instead of doing 21 weeks in a row where by, week 16 or 17, I'm like, oh, I'm so tired. Now it's like, I can't wait till I start again because I want to talk about this. I want to do this. I want to try that. And that keeps the excitement, I start missing it, I guess. And then I jump in, and I'm not scared to jump in because I know I'm not committing an absurd amount of time to it. It's just 10 weeks and then we're going to take a breather again. And that's been great. So I think that's like an absolute key thing to help make it sustainable for me. I hope that answers the question. But thanks again, Keith, for the voice submission. And now the other places that I asked for questions were on YouTube in the community post and on Instagram. So we're going to start with YouTube because that's the one I have right here. Let's see. Few questions here. One from Lyndon Baptiste says, on podcasting, great follow-up to our previous question, how often should you post, and how do you pull off a great interview if you don't have a lot of time to research guests? Okay. This is a good question. I'm not a huge interview podcast person, but I've done my fair share of them. And I also have done a ton of interviews, like through my old job and stuff, both for podcasts and video things. So how often should you post, and how do you pull off a great interview for guests you don't have time to research? Let's talk about frequency. I think that goes back to what I said before. That's just my opinion. And it's all about sustainability. So whatever you can manage, if there are some people who do daily episodes 5 days a week, Monday through Friday. That's not sustainable for me. Once a week is good for me. And I like once a week because it's enough time. It's enough time to create something without feeling like I'm putting too much pressure to make something or just like forcing something to happen because I ran out of time. It's also regular enough, but it's not infrequent enough that people are going to forget about it. So, it can become a part of somebody's schedule. I think that's really important, where if you want to do other things like, special episodes here or more frequent things there, whatever, But if there's a certain, regular frequency that people know they can get your stuff, I think you'd be surprised at how quickly it becomes part of their routine. And I don't know what effect or what actual data that has in terms of growth or whatever it might be, but just in terms of building a relationship with an audience, it's great. The number of people who tell me that like they spend their breakfast or lunch breaks on Thursdays watching my videos is awesome. Like, I love that that's a thing. Like, it's Thursday lunch break. Cool. I'll like put on Tom's new video for this week because he always will have a video on Thursday. That's amazing. If somebody wants to listen to the podcast on Monday morning on the way to work, cool. Like, there's going to be a new episode there for them to listen to. I think that's important. With podcasting, I try to keep in mind that people probably listen to many podcasts. And if every podcast that someone listens to is posting 3 times a week, that's like more than anyone could get through, especially if it's longer form stuff. And I know for me, especially when I, was commuting more, it would sometimes take a day or 2 to get through a podcast episode, depending on how long it was or even more. And, so now it's like, do people have time to actually listen to everything? That's why I just think once a week for an hour-long show like this works really well for both the audience and the creator. As far as the interview goes, researching the guest is important, obviously, to know things to ask them. I think if you can't do a bunch of research on someone, like they don't have a Wikipedia page or you don't have time to do that kind of thing, if it is someone who's been interviewed before, maybe just skimming through that so that you don't just repeat existing interviews. There are certain things that are going to come up every time somebody talks about something, but there are also things where if someone's a fan or interested in that person, they probably have heard those stories before. So like, can you bring out something new? This kind of applies to someone who's, I guess, a little more like already notable, like who people would already be aware of. That's a crucial thing, is just not repeating stuff, especially if someone's used to being interviewed. Sometimes they'll just sort of slide into their stories. And you can hear that when you hear those interviews, someone will ask like, tell me how you decided to start your business. And you can tell this person, they've just like blacked out, but they're telling this whole story that they've told 1,500 times before, and they have the pacing and the jokes and everything down. And even if you hear them on another like podcast later, it's like beat for beat exactly the same. I try to avoid anything that would elicit that kind of a response. So, I guess it comes down to like, do you want to know the person's take on something or something that's currently happening, or do you want to know the person's backstory, their why, their origin, those kinds of things? I feel like a lot of interviews do lean towards the origin of stuff, and maybe then it could be more interesting to go like, okay, this person is an expert in this field, or is really skilled at this thing, or is known for this thing. Let's just talk about that. And you don't necessarily have to know everything because you're asking them. Okay, you just finished this project here. Why did that happen? Or what was that about? How was this connected to that thing? I think that's important. The other thing is to just have a good conversation. This was something I had to work with my students a lot when we would do documentaries, is they would prepare for interviews and they would come up with questions. Like, okay, you're going to be interviewing, I don't know, a city council person. Cool, here are your questions. And then sometimes the students would be like married to their list of questions, and they would ask, a question like, oh, what made you interested in local politics? And then the person would say like, well, when I was a kid, I had this amazing experience where aliens came down from another planet and appeared to me and told me that I had to run for local city council, otherwise my family would be held hostage in a distant galaxy. Some insanely interesting answer is what they would say. And then instead of following that thread, the students would just go to their next question because that was the next question. It'd be like, what do you hope to accomplish in your next term? It's like, hang on. The thing the person just said was way more interesting than anything you could have expected. Let's explore that. And I think that's an important thing. And you don't have to do a ton of research because it's more about conversation. You would ask a basic question, usually about the why somebody does something, or maybe the how. And then they'll probably say something interesting, and you can just pull at that thread, which I think will make for a more interesting conversation and will probably more easily pull out information that's not as readily available elsewhere. That was my very long answer to that question, but I appreciate it. Introvert Amateur says, I know the answer already, but still, what factors would have to change to get you back into a teaching job? Money, more vacation, creative freedom? Since this probably won't change in reality, does that fact make you feel better when you have a period of low views, less revenue, social media, anxiety, etc.? Would you say the stress of full-time YouTube is less compared only to your teaching job back then, excluding the fact you ran both parallel for several years? Currently still consuming only your podcast of you and Heather. Love both of you and your work. Happy to see both of you progress over the last few years, listening to both, and makes me feel connected. It's so nice to hear from you. I appreciate it very much, all the kindness and support. Teaching is tough. Yeah, I ran into one of my friends who's a teacher recently, and we were sort of talking. We taught at the same school, but we were friends before we taught together. And I was sort of getting some updates I hadn't got since I left my job. And it just was like, I just walked away thinking, there's no way I could, there's no way I could still be doing that. And the part that sucks is the part I miss is actually the teaching. The part where I get to be in a classroom, especially with students who chose to be there because they're interested in the subject, and share something with them. But even when it wasn't digital media, when I was teaching English, it was fun to figure out interesting ways to explain this stuff and to talk about this stuff and to make it, I don't know, relevant or fun or, something like that. That is I really do love teaching. It's fantastic. The problem is that it's such a small part of a teacher's job, unfortunately. You would think, based on the fact that the job title is teacher, that they would spend a lot of time teaching. But it's almost like I've heard stand-up comics say that they perform on stage for free. What they get paid for is having to be on the road for 6 months at a time, and all the crazy inconvenience that comes around them getting to do the thing they actually want to do. Teaching's kind of the same. Getting to just share your subject, your knowledge, your passion for it with other people and try to help ignite that within them is something that I would do for free. Everything else, the politics and the insane expectations, and I had a budget meeting once, and I'm not exaggerating. It went for 6 months. Literally this one budget meeting where it was in a previous program I taught in. We were supposed to figure out our annual budget for the upcoming year, which wasn't I think we had $75,000 was our budget for equipment and trips and things. That came from the state of California. All we had to do was just say, okay, there's a certain percentage that has to go to equipment, a certain percentage that has to go to student enrichment, a certain percentage that can be used for things like hiring bus drivers, covering substitute teachers, just keeping the program up and running. It's really not that hard to tentatively plan out the budget for the year. 6 months. It went from April to October, and it was so insane because we would spend 2 hours in this meeting, and then our department head would be like, okay, we need to wrap this up here. We'll pick this back up on this date. And then we'd go to the next date, and it would just sort of be rehashing stuff. We never made any progress. And that was one of the reasons I ended up wanting to leave and go to my other job where I got to start the program, was because I thought, this is insane that this is the kind of stuff we're spending our time on. I feel like I could be a little more efficient on my own, which was true, but there's still certain things it's really just tricky when you're simultaneously, as a teacher, supposed to be basically somebody's surrogate parent and personal savior is sort of an expectation that's put on you, but also you're sort of evil and you're brainwashing kids and you're doing all that kind of stuff too. And you are just doing your job. You're just trying to do a good job. You're trying to have a positive impact, trying to do a good job. And that's sort of all you want to do, but it's so tough. And then the expectations that get put on teachers are so insane. I did finally, my last couple years, I started sort of pushing back against all of the, there's an open house, there's this sporting game, there's this. Can we count on you be, or can you chaperone this? Can you do that? And it's I'm already working 70 or 80 hours a week, and now you want me to work unpaid, till 1 a.m. on a Tuesday, standing in the gym, chaperoning a dance? No. So what I started doing was saying, I can totally do that. Just let me know where I submit my timesheet for the extra hours. And then people would immediately say oh, we'll let you know if we actually need you. We'll probably get somebody else. Yeah, they'll never pay you. And pay wasn't even my thing, honestly. So if you wanted to ask what it would take to go back, I miss actually teaching students. And I loved being able to have a program where the students were in it for a number of years. So it wasn't just we have this short amount of time to cram all this information. It was like I got to go from them coming in and kind of sort of being interested in something, discovering what it was, discovering that maybe they do actually have an interest for it and an aptitude for it, and then building that up to the point where it's really impressive. And that takes a long time. And I love that. So being able to do that would be amazing. Being able to do that without all the BS of staff meetings and school politics and all that kind of stuff would be amazing. But in order to do that, one of my big fights was always just like scheduling. And like, I appreciated the care and concern that our counseling department gave students, but the complete just like lack of awareness of, you know, a student who'd been in a program for 3 years and then the start of their senior year comes, they're supposed to be in the capstone class, but now instead they have, I don't know, some random math class that period. And then of course I and them go to their counselor and say, hey, this person's been 3 years in this program. They need the final class to graduate from the program. Why are they in this weird math class? And it's like, oh, it's just sort of the way the schedule works out. We can't do anything about it. The students don't really know that they can push back against that. And it's like, you're not taking away the knowledge or the experience that this student has gained over the 3 years, but you are robbing them of being able to finish the thing that they started. Like they're not going to get what they have been putting the time and energy in to get. It's like quitting college one semester before you get your degree. Like you still have all the knowledge, but like just get the degree, like just go a little bit further and get that. And then that times 200 students is pretty exhausting. So being able to be supported in the idea that like, these are the students, this is an important thing to put them through. And then small class sizes. This was always my thing. I didn't have a problem like managing a lot of students, but realistically, you can't give your attention to a lot of them. So it wasn't like things were out of control or whatever, but I can't have a classroom of 49 teenagers and actually give each one individualized attention every single day. That's just, especially in something that's a little more technical and takes time to explain. Everybody's kind of got individual needs and working on individual things. So smaller class sizes was always my thing. I thought pay was fine. I'm in Southern California. I think teachers, all teachers, we can say, probably deserve to be paid more. Teachers in lots of places, especially in the US get paid. I would not be a teacher for $30,000 a year. Like, no, we'll just go work at Subway. Like it's the same wage, and I don't have to do all the teaching stuff. But my pay was fine. Benefits were fine. They could always be better, but I didn't really have any complaints about that. Mine was always classroom size, and every time it would come up, like either in a professional development thing, like what can we do to solve these behavior and academic performance issues with students, or it would be a union thing about like, what do we need to, what do we want to bargain for in the next negotiations and things. I was always like, I don't care about the pay. It's fine. Like it's good. Let's get class sizes small. Let's take that money and energy, and instead of having 49 kids in a classroom, let's have 26, which is probably still too many, but that would be a completely different environment. That would change everything and eliminate almost every problem in teaching is smaller class sizes. And I can't tell you the number of times I was literally laughed like out of a room or away from a table for suggesting that. That would be my honest suggestion in a non-snarky way. I would say I think the most important thing to focus on is smaller class size because that would solve all the problems. And it would literally be people laughing out loud saying, well, that'll never happen. So what can we actually do? Why can that never happen? Like that will solve all the problems. But I guess like they said, it will never happen. So yeah, smaller class sizes, getting to focus on students in a meaningful way and being supported in that. Like, school and district administration should exist to support students. Schools won't exist without students, right? Like, if it's just a building with a bunch of adults in it, that's nothing. You need students to go to the school. So students are, kind of the number one priority there. The students can't do anything at the school without teachers teaching them stuff. So teachers right below the students, the next most important thing at a school. Everything else should support that. Like everything else should support teachers and students, and it's backwards right now. It's students show up, teachers try to support their students, and then teachers also are trying to like please administrators who are trying to please other administrators who also have administrators. It's insane. So yeah, that's That's my education rant in this Q&A episode. Moving on, Andy Honeycutt. I'd like to learn more about your process for preparing to make a video. How do you brainstorm topics, tools, apps to use, outline and research scripts, B-roll ideas, setup, etc.? That's a great question, Andy. I always love process questions with anyone. I love figuring out how people do stuff, how they do what they do, basically. So I appreciate that you asked that. I've talked about my process a few times, but basically like coming up with ideas for me is just, again, like I said, for podcasts, when it comes to videos, it's what am I interested in and what do I think other people will be interested, and hopefully it will overlap. I feel like I've gotten bad at understanding what will overlap lately, but hopefully there's some overlap there. I think the most important thing is I have to be interested. I can't, like this Deity microphone just came out, right? The one I'm holding right here. There's definitely an impulse to say, here's a new product. Let me make a video about it. But I'm not the Home Shopping Network. I don't want to just tell you the features of this thing and make a commercial for it. I would like to know there's something interesting about this, which is it's got a lot of really cool features at an amazing price point. Now I want to know how well it actually works, because if it works well, then it's going to be an amazing thing for me to know that I can recommend to people. And that's really exciting because I know that people have the problem of wanting to get good audio on a budget. And so if this solves that problem, I get really excited about it. And then I can make a video about it, and other people, hopefully it will solve their problem, they're excited about it. And so that's kind of like, I try to find things like that I'm excited to share or discuss and will be beneficial to other people, or at least interesting to other people, hopefully. Once I come up with an idea like that, again, it's all about the Notes app. I just create a notes document that has kind of a bullet point outline for what I might want to cover. It's not super scripted usually, unless there's very specific points I need to hit in something. I love the Notes app because it's across all my devices. So whether it's like the computer that's in my office or my phone or an iPad or a laptop somewhere, as soon as I have an idea, I can just put it in that document. It's going to be there. I don't have to like keep these things in my brain. And then I sort of, that's how I would start outlining a video and figuring out what I need. If I know there's specific things like certain B-roll shots or camera angles or tech things to take care of, I'll make notes of that. Otherwise, I'll do the best I can. I'll start editing. And then usually when I go through the editing process, I might make another list of B-roll shots that I need. Like, be sure to show the HDMI port on this camera, show, the lens connector, show this thing, that thing, whatever. Try to, keep that stuff in mind. And I have a collection of ideas usually. So if I'm not sure what I want to do, like, hey, I need to work on a video, but nothing, it's like you open the fridge and there's food in there, but nothing sounds good. It's like, okay, what should I do? So then I go through my list and I try to figure out what would be, am I exhausted? What would be the easiest thing to make? Am I feeling like trying to get some kind of challenge, like a technical challenge? What's going to be the most technically challenging thing to make? And then I sort of pick that idea. So I always have a running like bin of ideas to pull from. And then I try to pay attention to what people are interested in. I don't care about product release cycles. So I'm not like, Apple's releasing a bunch of new stuff. I need to cover every product they cover. I don't care about that. But if people are, like the Rodecaster Pro 2 is a good example of that, because that was something that did come out and I was interested in it and people were interested in it. And just because of the stuff I had made in the past, people were interested in what I thought about it. So it's like, that's probably something that's important to share and to explain and explore. So I try to pay attention to what is interesting, or if there's an issue that really is popping up. If I start getting the same question over and over again in my comments, then it's a pretty good idea that like, maybe there should be a video about this. Like, a big one is connecting the Rodecaster to the A10 Mini, which I still have not really found a great solution for. I found ways to do it, but nothing that I like and think gets great results. So that's a video I'd love to make. I made one with the old Rodecaster, but I'm still not happy with the results totally. So that's something I would love to make. I've almost thought about making a video that's called "Don't Connect Your Rodecaster to the ATEM." But so that's kind of how that works and basically how the process comes together there. Let's see here. Ryukin DW162YT asks, I'm having a curious question here. How do I create a quote-unquote cinematic video with a normal smartphone camera? Like in this case, I have a single camera on my phone. Hey, I was telling Heather this, like I used to get made fun of, and when I was in the classroom, like this was a couple years ago, so iPhones have progressed. I have the iPhone XR, which has, I hope this isn't too embarrassing, it's only got one camera on the back. There's only one lens back here. Like students would literally make fun of me. And I was at like a poor school. It was still like using like an old iPhone. It's got like one camera on it. I'm sorry. Okay. So anyway, the camera on this phone is not great, but it's more than capable. And so I don't know what version of a phone you're using, but if it's anything beyond like an iPhone 6 or up or an Android equivalent to that, it's probably fine. It depends on what you mean by cinematic, I think. If it's shallow depth of field, that's tricky. I know newer phones have the cinema modes where they try to like use AI to blur out the backgrounds, and it's mixed results. If that's what you're looking for, like blurry background kind of stuff, it's not super easy or possible, but that's not necessarily the only thing that makes something cinematic either. If you watch movies will use shallow depth of field a lot, but they'll also use really wide depth of field too, a lot, where everything is in focus. So I think what jumps to my mind first is framing and composition and lighting. I think those are the two most important things in terms of any camera you're using, making it look cinematic, with my quotation fingers in the air here. Because your composition is really key. If you have an amazing location or a really cool subject, but it's framed super weird and there's no purpose or intention behind it, that's going to look strange. Like right now, I tried to frame myself well, but the number of times I see people in like a frame where they're very, very small and there's like way too much headroom, or someone's way over to the side and there's just like dead space everywhere, like paying attention to how you're using the composition of your frame is really important. Some default camera apps have this. If not, you can download third-party camera apps that will put the grid lines on the display for you, or all kinds of markers, so you can more easily compose things, because it is tricky on a phone. Sometimes, your phone's down at a weird angle, you're looking at a weird angle, and it looks a certain way, but then when you watch it back, you realize it was not the way you thought it looked. So sometimes having sort of those helping guides and things on screen really does help. And then beyond that is lighting. Especially with phones, the sensors inside are really, really tiny. And so low light is where the image starts to fall apart really quickly. But if you can add a lot of lighting, that's really going to help things to start looking a lot better. Even if that were to mean like getting ND filters for your phone, or like a little attachment where you could put an ND filter, and then adding, like if you wanted to film a darker scene, instead of actually using darkness, because that's probably not going to look great on the phone, probably using lights around. I don't know if you have dedicated video lights or not, but more bright lighting, and then using ND filters to sort of bring that exposure down a little bit. Filmright just did a really good episode about this. I think it was called like recreating a cinematic, make any location cinematic or something like that. And they're not using a phone, but it does sort of explain how much light is needed for things to look dark. And the way you can use ND filters, not just when you're outside. I think that would be a good thing. And lighting also, not just for how the camera performs in terms of the sensor, but that's also going to change how your subject looks. Like if you go outside at 12 p.m. and the sun's directly overhead, you're going to have such harsh lighting and shadows everywhere. If you're in that same exact location, in golden hour, right before sunset, everything's going to look magical. And the only thing that changed is your light went from super bright overhead to like, a softer, different angle over here. So playing with your lighting, paying attention to lighting, that's the easiest way to level up anything with any camera, regardless of if it's a phone or the Nikon Z9 that I'm using right now, which is like a $6,000 camera or something. Oh, here's one from a channel, Heather Just Play. I don't know her. Will you please consider my idea for the series Tom Recreates? Yes. So this is Heather, my wife. She has had an idea for a long time where she wants me to make videos where I try to recreate other setups, whether it's like another YouTube, like Marquez Brownlee's studio setup or Peter Lindgren's setup, or, a shot from a movie or something, and try to explain like, okay, here is, say Peter, for example. Here's Peter in his studio. Look at this. Like, let's break down his shot right here. He has a lot of depth in the background. The background is kind of dark, but he does have these accent lights here, which are teal and orange. His key light must be here. He's probably using this kind of lens. I know I could just ask him in this case, but we'll pretend that I have to like break it down and, like actually figure out what it looks like. This is a 24 millimeter lens, or wow, this must be a prime lens over here. And based on how the audio sounds, the mic's probably positioned this way. It's this kind of microphone. Like break things down and then try to recreate it. which sounds like a really fun idea. It just sounds like a big, overwhelming idea. And then you could even do that for like movie and TV shots. The thing that's held me back is it did feel too overwhelming, but I think instead of trying to recreate a whole video, like that is a lot of work. I think recreating a shot could be really fun, because Heather's point was like, you have all these tools and you have this experience. You could use these things and you could figure out when you need a high end thing, like you really need this very specific piece of gear to do this, or this is something you could achieve with something that most people have lying around their house or could get for really cheap. And that would be really fun. My other hesitation is that I'm not a filmmaker and I would never call myself one. And I feel like that topic leans towards like the filmmaker world. But I've thought about like last night we're rewatching the Expanse series, and there was a shot in the Expanse that Heather brought this up again. She's like, you should redo that shot. And it was a very simple, like someone looking in a bathroom mirror, but the lighting was strange and like the focal length was kind of strange. So it was very simple in terms of location. Like it's a 2 or 3 light setup and just a wide lens. She's like, you could try to recreate something like this. I'm like, yeah, but I'm not a filmmaker. I don't know that. But maybe that could be the catch, is like literally like, I'm not a filmmaker and I tried to recreate this movie scene or whatever, or this shot from a movie. Like that might be a fun way to approach it. I think it could be a fun thing to do. I just need to wrap my head around it a little bit more. But I do think that would actually be a pretty fun thing. So I do like that idea. That is, let's see. Now we're going to jump over to Instagram, if I can figure that out. I actually got a surprising number of questions, which is crazy. So let's just start back here. All right. I'm probably going to mispronounce some names. This is from Annie Liz. How are you so underrated? First of all, thank you. If you think I'm underrated, I would take that as a huge compliment. And I think what I'll say is I would rather be underrated than overrated. So that's my answer to that one. Let's see here. Here's a good one. Hesh Gurjar asks, what should be the thought process while you're going to buy your first camera? That is tricky. I think, okay, budget is key. Obviously, that's going to be on anyone's mind when they're investing in something, anything, but especially something expensive like a camera, which could be a potentially new hobby, even a career field. I never think you should go crazy into debt for gear or something like that. I know there are stories of people where they're like, I maxed out my credit card to get, like, I think Casey Neistat tells a story all the time, like maxed out my credit card to get a camcorder and an iMac, and that's how I started making movies. There are times when people do that and it works out. But, it's kind of like how, whatever, it's like, oh, Steve Jobs and Bill Gates dropped out of college. It's like, yeah, I don't know what that means. You should drop out of college, though. like you and I are not them, so maybe it's not the best idea. So get the most you can while still being financially responsible. If that means you need to wait a little bit longer, you could get something okay now, but if you wait 6 months, you get something great. It's definitely worth the wait. I've learned and am still learning the idea of buy once, cry once. Because if you try to get the cheaper thing that you think is going to be good enough, this is how I ended up with a Sega Saturn instead of a Nintendo 64 when I was a kid. It's not going to be good enough. It's not going to satisfy you. Sorry for any Sega Saturn lovers out there. And then you're probably still going to end up at some point getting the other thing anyway, at which point now you've lost even more money and more resources and more time. So, say you really want a full frame camera and you're thinking of the FX3, the Sony FX3. But then you see the FX30. It's basically the same camera, only difference is a crop sensor, and it's half the price. It could satisfy all of your needs. Like, it could give you everything that you want. But if you really want that full frame sensor, it doesn't really matter how good the FX30 is. It's not going to satisfy your needs because it's not a full frame camera. And so you're going to get it. You're going to be excited because you have new gear honeymoon phase, and that's going to wear off. And then you're going to find yourself going, I really wish I had the FX3. So, I think it's important to be realistic about what you want, why you want it. Don't over get something. Like, if it's your first camera and you're kind of unsure if you like photography or videography, you don't need the Nikon Z9, which is $6,000. No. But you also don't want a cheap piece of junk And I think that's the biggest thing is my go-to recommendation for a long time now has been the Sony ZV-E1 for somebody's like first diving in camera. I think there are other good options now, like the Canon R10 is probably like the closest other budget-ish option that I might recommend. I would still lean towards the Sony though, just because it's a little more versatile. But there are cheaper cameras than either of those. The problem is those cheaper cameras, you're not going to be paying in money, but you're going to be paying in time and frustration. Like they are just going to frustrate you. It's just going to be, it's going to be an exhausting experience to use them and to work with them. So that's why you want to like hit a certain minimum level. I would say the level of the Sony ZV-E10 is where you want to be. It's good for video. It's good for photo. It comes with a great kit lens. If you're new to lenses and cameras, having a good kit lens that's pretty versatile. It's not the most amazing lens in the world, but it's enough to get the job done. And more importantly, it's enough to teach you what you like. So if that lens, doesn't zoom in far enough and you find yourself always wishing you could zoom in further, then when it's time to buy a new lens, you want something with more zoom. If that lens doesn't go wide enough, then you want a wider lens. It will teach you what you like and what you don't like. And that's why I think it's just a good camera. And I think that the ZV-E10 also, it's a camera you can grow with as your skills develop. The camera's not going to like start constraining you. And if it does get to a point where you feel like you're pushing the limits of it, or you just want to upgrade to something else, it's not a camera that then becomes irrelevant. It's an amazing second camera. It has all kinds of other uses. So, I think that kind of thing is really important. Understanding your needs, getting the most you can for your budget, not settling for something that's just super cheap, because you will get frustrated once the excitement of getting a new piece of gear wears off. Ryan McLaren asks, what, in my opinion, Tom's opinion, is the best budget audio interface? Budget. So when you say budget, my mind immediately goes to like $100, $150. And in that price range, you kind of end up with like the Rode AI1, the Scarlett Solo, maybe the Scarlett 2i2. They're all pretty much the same. The Scarlett 2i2 is kind of the go-to. It is a good one because even if you don't think you need two XLR channels, you never know. And having the two just opens up a lot of versatility. The only downside is that if you're using a dynamic microphone, the preamps aren't the best. They're fine, but they're not the best. You'll likely need some kind of mic booster with a lot of dynamic microphones. The good news, though, is something like the Clark Technic CT1 is a very affordable mic booster, so you're not spending $100 on an interface and then $120 on a booster. So that's good. If you're using a condenser microphone, though, honestly, the interface, I don't think it even matters. Like, whatever the cheapest interface is that has phantom power will be fine, is kind of how I feel about that, which is all of them. If you're using a dynamic microphone, it's tough to get something good that has good preamps. I know the Wave XLR, which I haven't used, is supposed to be pretty clean. Because beyond that, you get into like the Vocaster 2, which is $300. It's not super cheap, but the quality is pretty fantastic. So if you could go up to like the $250, $300 price range, the Focusrite Vocaster 2, it's kind of what you probably want the Scarlett 2i2 to be. The quality's great. You don't need a booster with it. And the coolest part is it has a dedicated camera output, audio output. So like you can just take a 3.5 cable, plug it right into your camera and get perfect quality audio in your camera. No other interface has an easier way to connect to your camera than the Focusrite, the Vocaster 2. So that would be my vote if you could choose any of them. If you're using a condenser mic, it doesn't matter. If you're using a dynamic mic, just any of them, but you probably need like a booster of some kind. Hello, this is from Vanel de Agoste. Hello, how can I make a podcast like you in Creole? Learn, I don't know, learn Creole. A podcast like me is real simple. I just sit here and talk about stuff I'm interested in. And that's pretty much it. And for video, I just recorded to Ecamm Live as one video file. Audio is Rodecaster Pro, and all gets uploaded to Buzzsprout and sent out. And that's pretty much it. I'm not doing anything special in terms of podcast production that anybody else couldn't do. Getting yourself a good microphone, getting some interesting topics, and figuring out a topic or a genre or an approach that you want to take that you're not going to get tired of, that you could go for 10 plus episodes talking about, that's really the most important thing. The gear and the production is kind of secondary, honestly. D Rantings asks, any resources for knowing what you're doing in terms of compression, loudness, gain, etc.? Many resources. I kind of avoid talking about those things because there are so many variables that it just sort of becomes difficult. Even if I were to make a video that was like how to use compression on the Rodecaster Pro 2, I would still end up with a flood of comments and messages of people talking about other interfaces and other software and stuff. And it's like, I don't know. I only know this one thing right here. So it depends on what you're using. If you're using a Rode thing, either of the Rodecasters, Rode has a really great series of short instructional videos that kind of cover everything. That's what I would turn to there, because it's like, that's also why I haven't made those videos, because Rode just does it better. Like, it's the company that made the thing. They explain it super clearly in 3.5 minutes. Like, that's perfect. If you're not using like the Rodecaster and you're using something else or using software, that's where I would turn to one of the really, really knowledgeable audio people. The first person that pops into mind is Curtis Judd, because he has, if you go back through his catalog from like 10 years to now, he's going to answer any question you have about that kind of stuff. And he's going to be able to explain it really, really clearly, and then also give you very clear examples of it. And he also covers different things. So, you know, he might cover a certain piece of hardware or software like Adobe Audition. I think Curtis Judd's channels, like for learning things like compression, gain, EQ, that's like my number one place that I would recommend to start. And he's also just a super nice guy too. Sam from Aruba asks, well, actually left a very on-brand thing that says, not a question, but next time you go on vacation, come down to Aruba. It sounds like a nice place. Sam from Aruba recommending me to go to Aruba. In fact, I'm a little jealous. You're rubbing it in. Rubbing it in. Oh, look, it's Sam again. Sam now asks advice for someone starting a one-man video production studio for a podcast. Simplicity. Simplicity. When you add video to a podcast, everything gets complicated. So keep it simple to start. The thing that I always tell everyone is, if you have something, if you already have some kind of camera, some kind of audio, start with what you have. I started this podcast with my old Zoom, the Zoom H4n, and a video mic plugged into it. And that was it. Like, it was not ideal, but it was enough to get started. And then after I did a few episodes and realized, yeah, I want to keep doing this, and this is how this equipment is not working for me, then I started like upgrading and bringing things in and changing it around. But I think it's important to start with what you have, see what kind of results you can get, and then upgrade as your specific needs become apparent. You know, you might notice that your environment is really bad for sound, whatever your studio space is. Maybe you need to spend a lot more money on sound treatment than a new microphone or something. But maybe you're in a really well-treated space, but your video quality is not great. So, okay, do we need to focus on lighting? Do we need a different camera? Do we need 2 cameras? You know, that kind of thing. Like, I think a lot of people, they want to have the perfectly polished video podcast from the beginning. And, you know, some people have the background, the history to do that. Like, if you have a career and an experience in video production, audio production, you can probably put something together so that even though it's your first episode, it's like Heather, I guess, with her new channel, her gaming channel. You know, her first video looked better than a lot of other people's, 200th video, but that's because it was her first video on that channel after doing this for 6 years. So it wasn't her first thing. She just took all the knowledge and applied it to something new. If you're that kind of person, then you could probably piece together something that looks pretty decent right away. But most people aren't that, and most people just want something that looks good and sounds good. But it can be so stressful to get to that point that you never actually get started because nothing seems perfect enough. And so I think instead of stressing out about that, just starting with what you have, putting things out there, and then upgrading over time is going to be really important. That's the easiest thing to do. It's going to be the most budget-friendly, the most practical, and the least stressful, because you don't want the process to become stressful. Believe it or not, the production process, the tech process can actually be fun. That's what you want it to be. You want to be able to focus on having fun while you make all this stuff. I accidentally closed the window that had all my questions. Let's see here. Adrian Adrian, I was going to say Vilez. Maybe that's right, but I feel like that's not right. I see your name all the time, and now my mind blanked when I'm trying to say it out loud. Would you partner up with Rode or someone else to make the Tom mic the best podcast mic? So this is a funny story. Short answer, like the idea of designing something from scratch, like last week we talked about camera bags, like the Peter McKinnon camera backpack. That kind of thing sounds awesome, but obviously like someone like Peter is in a different position in a lot of different ways. And so being able to go, okay, here's all this stuff that I've used over a number of years. Here's what I like, what I don't like. Let's take everything that's good and put it into one new thing that covers all the bases. Sounds really, really fun. For something like a microphone, though, I feel like that's a challenge because microphone companies, so many of them have been around for so long. Like, I'm not going to be like, you guys should make a microphone that sounds good. Like, they're like, yeah, this is what we do. So the answer is yes. I don't 100% know what that looks like. I feel like things are getting close. Like if I could take like the sound quality of the Lewitt LCT 240, because this is the one, every time I use this on anything, it's the one that won the microphone showdown. Every time I use this microphone, it's like the showstopper that everybody loves. So the sound quality from this, but the usability of it, just the way the shot, it's not super versatile or like wildly user friendly in terms of how you set it up. So if I could take this sound quality and put it in like the body of the Sona, which is so versatile and easy to use, but also has really great sound rejection. So it's not going to pick up unwanted sounds, but also with like the overall build quality of the Earthworks, maybe something like that. I don't know what that would be. I did, funny story though, have a company reach out not that long ago, like 3 weeks ago, that was kind of asking, like, we want to develop a new microphone. I was sort of unclear. They sort of wanted this. They wanted like, let's collaborate on a new microphone. And it's a company that like, I don't have anything from and I'm not really interested in anything they make, but it's not bad. Like it was a real company. It wasn't just like some fake, weird Amazon reseller thing. But I just said thanks, but no thanks, because yeah, it didn't make sense. Like I'm not using your other products, so I'm not going to really dive in and go like, yeah, no, it's the best thing ever. That would be cool. Like if I ever did anything that was sort of like a merch type thing, I think something that's practical would be cool. Like I definitely, you know what, instead of microphones, I think I'm not going to come up with better microphone ideas than someone from like Earthworks or Sennheiser will. But I could definitely come up with a thing or two about a better boom arm, and that would be really fun. So that's the thing I would want to work on, is a better boom arm, because yeah, that's an area where I think some work needs to be done on stuff. Skylar Lee Stutzman asks, how do I naturally become more comfortable in front of a camera, being yourself, etc.? That just takes time. It's the least sexy answer in the world, but it's just practice. If you're familiar with me or anything I do, I did not start my YouTube channel intending to be in front of the camera, but it's just sort of the way I could make more videos was if I just was the one in front of the camera. And it feels very uncomfortable at first, and it's weird. And it's weird to then it's weird to film yourself. It's weird to talk to a camera. It's weird to edit yourself, and that's weird to put that out there for other people. I think anybody who's been doing YouTube for a significant chunk of time, if you go back to their early videos and you watch them, you're going to notice, like, even if some of like the key personality is there, you're going to notice a huge difference. You're going to see that they weren't always what they are when they started. Even I when I was working on my GoPro 11 video recently, I went back to look at I did a GoPro Hero 5 versus Hero 7 video several years ago. And it's a fine video, but the energy level in that video is like flatline. I don't like a lot of my older videos. I feel bad. They are kind of like, this is the Lewitt LCT 240, and it has a windscreen that comes off, and the windscreen's held by magnets. The magnets are pretty cool. And then you plug the microphone in, and it connects over here. They're very like, That's kind of how it feels looking back on it. That's not how I remember recording them. I remember being like the same, but it just, yeah. What I used to tell my students when we would do our broadcast every day, which was a live stream, because I'm working with like the students who want to be anchors on a live broadcast are pretty outgoing usually. And we're in a classroom environment where we know each other really well, and they're fun, they're dynamic, they're goofy, and then we turn on the camera and it's like, the football team is doing a fundraiser this Saturday from 9 to 5 at the car wash and I'm like, what? Are you reading a hostage like negotiation? Like, what is this? And so what I started telling my students is they had all heard the expression like the camera adds 10 pounds. And I was like, I don't know about that, but I do know that the camera takes away about 50% of your energy. So even if you think you're being like energetic and over the top, on camera, that's going to be like, it's not going to come across. So you kind of have to like do a little bit more in front of the camera, and to somebody else, it's actually just going to look normal. I don't know what that is, but the camera does kind of take away energy. And so that's an important thing to learn, but ultimately it's just practice. A really helpful thing that Heather taught me early on, like when we first met, was you don't have to release everything you record. Like there's not the pressure of you're recording a video, oh my God, everyone's going to see this. You could just record a video, you can practice talking, and you can never do anything with it. You can just run through, like build up the muscle memory, the comfort of being in front of the camera, and no one else ever has to see it, but you're going to get those reps in and you're going to grow and get better. You can record something that you intend to upload, but if you're just not comfortable with it, you don't have to. So just because you're pressing record on something doesn't mean other people have to see it and have the opportunity to judge you or criticize you. So that's a nice way to take the pressure off while you're recording. But the other thing is you're always going to be your own harshest critic, and you will just get better and better over time. I promise, like, even if no matter how good somebody thinks they are now, if you make a video now or do a podcast now, and then you do 15 or 20 more podcasts, where you end up is going to be a lot better than where you were at the beginning, no matter what. And even if you don't feel like you're growing along the way, once you go back and look at that first episode again, you're going to be like, oh my gosh, it's a totally different person. It's a totally different thing. So it really does just come down to practice. Azur Persant asks, what's the cheapest and easiest way to record a 3 to 4 person podcast? Cheap and easy are sometimes mutually exclusive. So 4-person, honestly, okay, if I'm being realistic, I would say the Zoom PodTrack P4, because that is pretty cheap. It's like $200-ish. You have 4 XLR inputs. It's super portable, super small. It's a great form factor. I have a review on my channel if you're not familiar with it. It does have 76 decibels of built-in gain. So in theory, you shouldn't need boosters with any microphones, including the SM7B, although it's not the cleanest gain in the world, but it does work. Point is, it works. You can even have some built-in sound effects, and it can run off battery power. It can run off AC power. Yeah, the Zoom PodTrack P4, that's the thing. That's the best all-in-one recorder, 3 to 4 people, and then just get some, then you need some microphones, obviously. I'm trying to think of good mic recommendations. I'm thinking that if you have 3 to 4 people using a P4, you're going to be relatively close together. So my impulse is to not use condenser mics because they're just a little more prone to picking up some of that environmental noise. You'll probably end up spending more on your microphones than your interface. But of course, there's things like the Samson Q2U, which are relatively affordable. And actually, I did my microphone showdown live stream a few weeks ago. The YouTube channel Obscure Mics also did a microphone showdown live stream. But as the name implies, the microphones featured were a little more obscure than mine. I would actually recommend going to check that out because I think it was the runner-up. I forget exactly which microphone it was. Kind of seemed like a Shure SM57, but it was like $20, and it sounded really, really good. So you could get 4. The point being, there are really good like $15 to $20 microphones out there at least to get you started. You could get those get a whole 4 microphone setup for under $20. Sometimes the cheaper microphones do also even come with XLR cables. Maybe not the highest quality cables in the world, but again, enough to get you started. Otherwise, you can just grab some Amazon Basic or some monoprice cables. But definitely check out, I mean, Obscure Mics, the channel, features a lot of really great, lesser known microphones, as the name implies. And a lot of them are very budget friendly. But the live stream shootout was super interesting because you can just do the A/B testing, just listen to what you like. And I was really blown away by the runner-up. That was like my personal favorite in that showdown, and I think it was $20. So I could be wrong about that if I'm remembering incorrectly, but that might be a really good option. Zoom PodTrack P4 plus like a decent-ish $20 set of $20 microphones would be good. Filmtopia Official, could you test which autofocus mode on the FX3 is best for tons of people in the background? I would just use I forget what it's called. I looked this up and I forget what it's called. It's not the face or the eye one, but it's just like, I don't know, general autofocus. The bigger thing would be to lower the sensitivity where it's not going to constantly be shifting between subjects, but it's just going to kind of stick on something. So, you know, if it's you with a bunch of people in the background, it'll stick on you, and other people walk by and it's not going to jump to their faces or whatever. And if it's like a wide shot, like a crowd shot with a bunch of people there, you can focus on an area of the frame, or you can focus on even like a building or a lamppost or something that's kind of in the middle of everybody, and the focus won't keep jumping around and doing those like micro shifts with everybody. But the Sony autofocus is so friggin' good. Which also, speaking of, the Nikon autofocus that I'm using right now is also really, really good. Actually, I think that brings us right around to the end. We have one last question. It's from Patrick Boberg, the composer of the theme song to this very podcast. Pat asks, when is the last time you laid in the grass and looked at the clouds? Well, fun fact, I don't know what it is, but our grass has a lot of bugs in it. So every time I'm out there, I get bit. My GoPro time-lapse video where I was out in the backyard with like a podium filming with the GoPro, I tried to wear like big long socks and all this stuff, which you can't really see on screen, but my legs were so bitten up. The rest of that whole week was just a nightmare of just like pain. I don't know what it is. I've been having a lot of mosquitoes lately, so kind of been avoiding hanging out in the grass to be honest. Looking at the clouds though, Heather and I do that like every day. We're fortunate enough that our kitchen, we have a big like sliding glass door thing that goes into the backyard, and it faces east, so it always gets really good sunrises and clouds and stuff, which is pretty freaking cool. And I don't know, where we live, it's a desert, there's lots of mountains, so you get clouds, especially this time of year, you get clouds and just cool sunsets and stuff. So actually clouds every day, lay in the grass, not as much as I would actually like to. So with that being said, thank you to everyone who sent in questions for this season's Q&A episode. I think I am at some point soon. I'm in the middle of a few projects at the moment, but I'm going to be doing a casual Q&A, very loosely structured live stream on the channel at some point because I haven't done just sort of a hangout live stream. And of course, if there's something that you just want to ask, you don't have to wait till episode 5 every season. You can just send an email anytime, or go to himynameistom.com and click the little thing to submit your voice message like Keith did at the beginning of this episode. So thank you very much to everyone for all just the kindness and the support, and for submitting questions. I really appreciate that. And again, the answer to the question I asked at the beginning, what would I recommend for doing a podcast remotely? The sponsor of this episode in this season, Riverside.fm. This is just my last reminder of the week that if you want to give Riverside a try, use the link in the description, and then also use promo code TOM15 for, believe it or not, 15% off your subscription. So definitely take a look if you're interested in doing any kind of remote podcast production. Riverside might just be the perfect thing for your workflow. With that being said, I appreciate it. I hope everybody has a safe, happy, healthy, fun rest of your week, and I will see you next time.